The sound of cars honking filled the air as people rushed through the busy junction in Port Harcourt. It was just another noisy morning until a strange figure appeared. His beard was tangled like weeds growing out of control, his hair was dirty and wild, and his suit looked like it had been dragged through mud. His shoes didn't match, and one of them had a hole big enough to see his toes. People stopped and stared. Some covered their noses because of the smell coming from his clothes. This wasn't just a man, he looked like a true madman. But if they had looked closely into his eyes, they would have seen something unusual. Beneath the dirt and mess was a sharpness that didn't belong to a man who had lost his mind. This was Johnson Andersononi, of the youngest and richest billionaires in Lagos. The CEO everyone admired. The man who owned mansions, private jets, luxury cars, and tech companies. And now, here he was, pretending to be insane. Johnson stood by the roadside, holding out his hand. His voice was calm but tired. "Please, madam, can you give me food? I haven't eaten. Please, just a little rice, or even bread." A young woman, wearing tight jeans and holding a takeaway plate of jollof rice, turned and looked at him. She frowned. "Leave me alone, madman!" she shouted. Before Johnson could move, she poured the rice and water on him and stormed away. The crowd laughed. Some recorded the scene with their phones. Johnson's body trembled with anger. For a moment, he wanted to throw away the act, reveal who he was, and have her arrested. But he clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "Patience, Johnson. This is why you came here. You need someone who will love you for who you are not. Your money." 2 days earlier, Lagos. Johnson had it all, yet he was miserable. His penthouse in Banana Island was filled with luxury, but at night, the silence was crushing. He had dated many beautiful women, but every relationship ended the same way: betrayal. His last heartbreak was the worst. Monica, the woman he believed truly loved him, had stolen $500,000 and one of his Bentleys before vanishing. She left no note, no goodbye, just betrayal. "Why does nobody love me for me?" Johnson asked himself one night, staring at his reflection in the mirror. Then an idea came to him, an idea so wild it made him laugh. What if I pretend to be poor? No. What if I pretend to be mad? If a woman could show kindness to a man she believed had nothing, maybe, just maybe, she was the one. The next morning, Johnson left Lagos quietly, taking his private jet to Port Harcourt. From there, he booked a private hotel room and called a special makeup artist who worked in the film industry. In a few hours, his transformation was complete. His hair was made to look overgrown and dirty. A fake beard, rough and tangled, was glued to his chin. He put on a tattered suit that smelled of sweat and mud. His face was smeared with dirt until even he couldn't recognize himself in the mirror. When he walked out of the hotel that day, even the staff avoided him. The test begins. Johnson stood at the junction, testing the hearts of strangers. Day 1 was terrible. Some insulted him, others threw stones to chase him away. By day 2, he almost gave up. Maybe this is a mistake, he thought. But then, something happened on day 3 that changed everything. Day 3, the unexpected kindness. The sun was blazing hot when Johnson saw her. A young woman, not older than 25, was standing near the bus stop. She wore a simple blouse and a faded skirt. Her sandals were worn out, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Johnson approached her slowly. "Please, I'm hungry. I just need food. And maybe someone to take me to the hospital. I think my head is not okay," he said, his voice low. "If you could propose to me with anything, just confess love to me. The doctor said I would be okay." The woman looked at him. For a moment, he thought she would walk away like the others. But instead, she opened her bag, brought out a small bottle of water, and handed it to him. "Here, drink this. Have you eaten today?" she asked softly. Johnson's heart skipped a beat. Nobody had spoken to him with such kindness in days. "No, I haven't," he said, pretending to tremble. She nodded and walked to a nearby kiosk, using her own money to buy him rice and beans. She then did the shocking thing. She removed the old ring on her finger, knelt down, and said, "Will you marry me?" He opened his eyes in school and said yes, stretching his finger for the ring while people watched in shock. They watched believing he might have used something on the woman. They believed she wasn't with her senses. Who proposed to a madman on the street? A beautiful woman for that matter, if not that this man is using something to control her, one woman said. But Sandra wasn't bothered. She just wants this man to be healed and be fine again, and what he wanted wasn't something beyond her power. Then, to his surprise again, she said, "Come, let's get you cleaned up. I know a salon nearby." Johnson could hardly believe it. This stranger, who didn't even know him, was willing to spend her small salary to help him. As the barber shaved off the fake beard and dirty wig, Johnson looked at her reflection in the mirror and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Her name was Sandra. And in that moment, Johnson told himself, "I think I've found the woman I've been searching for." But just as he was about to reveal who he truly was, something shocking happened that changed everything. The small salon smelled of hair cream and powdery soap. Its plastic ceiling fan hummed softly, barely cutting through the Port Harcourt heat. The barber, a middle-aged man with tribal marks and tired eyes, ran clippers through Johnson's thick wig, unaware of who he was grooming. Sandra sat on a small wooden bench across from him, her eyes gentle but worried. "You don't have to thank me," she said as Johnson looked at her. "I just felt you needed help. You kept saying your head wasn't okay." Johnson's heart thumped heavily under the dirty jacket he wore. Her voice was soft, real, without a trace of mockery or judgment. She wasn't treating him like garbage. She wasn't acting like she expected anything in return. She was just kind. He stared at her through the cracked mirror in front of him. "She thinks I'm mad. And still, she's helping me?" As the fake beard came off and the layers of grime were wiped away, Sandra's eyes widened slightly. She frowned, tilting her head. "Wait, you don't even look that sick anymore," she said, almost confused. "Are you sure you're okay? You look different now." Johnson smiled faintly. "I'm not sick," he whispered. Sandra blinked. "What do you mean?" He turned fully in the barber's chair, now clean-shaven, his face free from disguise. He looked like a completely different person, handsome, calm, and confident. For the first time, Sandra noticed the sharpness in his eyes. "I'm not mad, Sandra," he said clearly. Her mouth opened slightly, unsure whether to run or scream. "Wait, what?" He stood, removed the tattered jacket, and pulled out a clean card from his pocket. It had his name in gold. Johnson Anderson, CEO, Andertech Group. She took it slowly, her fingers trembling. "You're Johnson Anderson?" she asked, almost whispering the name. "Yes," he said. "I'm the billionaire people see on TV. But I came here pretending to be a madman, just to find someone like you." Sandra backed away slightly. "Is this a prank? Is there a camera somewhere?" Her eyes darted around. "No, it's not a prank," Johnson said softly. "I've been hurt so many times by women who only wanted my money. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. I needed to know who could love me with nothing." Sandra didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at him, like a dream she didn't believe she was having. "I picked Port Harcourt on purpose, somewhere far from my world in Lagos, somewhere I could hide without being recognized. You are the first person who didn't throw stones at me, the only one who offered me food and water. You even planned to take me to a psychiatric hospital." Sandra slowly sat back down. Her breath was shaky, and she held the card in her lap. "But why me?" Johnson smiled. "Because you didn't know who I was. And you helped me anyway. That means everything to me." A long silence followed. The barber, who had quietly watched the moment unfold, cleared his throat. "Ogre, your real face fine passo," he said, chuckling awkwardly. Johnson handed him 5 crisp, 10-0 notes. "Thank you," he said, before turning back to Sandra. "Come with me to Lagos," he said. "Please. I want to show you my world. I want you to see that I'm not just a name on a card. I want you to see what your kindness brought into my life." Sandra stared at him, lost in thought. "I'm just a secretary in a small firm," she said. "I don't have fancy things. I live in a one-room apartment. Why would a billionaire want someone like me?" "Because what you have is rare," he said gently. "You have a good heart. You didn't walk past me. You stopped. That means more to me than any gold or car." Tears welled up in Sandra's eyes. Her voice cracked. "I was just trying to help." Johnson reached for her hand. "And you did more than you'll ever understand." Later that day, private jet runway, Port Harcourt. Sandra had never been near a private jet before, let alone inside one. The steps leading up to the shining silver aircraft looked like stairs to heaven. Her sandals clicked nervously as she climbed, still unsure if she was in a dream. Inside, the jet smelled of vanilla and leather. Cream-colored seats, a gold-trimmed table. Everything sparkled. She sat down, silent, as the pilot greeted Johnson respectfully. "Good evening, sir. All set for Lagos." Sandra turned to him, still clutching the card he gave her. "Are you sure this is real? I still feel like I'm dreaming." Johnson smiled. "It's real. You changed my life in 3 hours." As the jet lifted into the sky, she looked out the window. The city below grew smaller. Her old life, her struggles, her late-night tears, her hopeless days faded with every mile. He reached into his jacket and brought out a small black box. Her breath caught. He opened it. A ring, simple but elegant, shone under the cabin light. "I'm not rushing you," he said, his voice soft. "But I need you to know how serious I am. When you're ready, I want to marry you." Sandra gasped. "But we just met. And yet I feel like I've known your heart forever," he replied. Her eyes brimmed with tears again. She laughed through her sobs. "This is too much. I was just an orphan girl trying to survive." "And now," Johnson said, taking her hand, "you're the woman who saved a billionaire pretending to be mad." But as the plane descended into Lagos, a new threat waited silently. Someone from Johnson's past had seen the viral video of him being insulted as a madman and recognized him. And she wasn't happy. She was coming. And she wanted everything but even if it meant destroying Sandra. The private jet touched down gently at the Lagos private airstrip, its silver wings glinting under the warm evening sun. Sandra clutched her handbag tightly as she stepped out behind Johnson. A fleet of black SUVs was already waiting on the tarmac. Uniformed drivers bowed respectfully, opening the doors like clockwork. She stood still for a moment, staring at the vastness before her. It felt like she had entered a movie. Johnson leaned toward her and whispered, "Welcome to your new life." But as Sandra smiled shyly and stepped into the car, far away, someone else watched a replayed video on her phone for the 50th time-lapse curled with bitterness. It was Monica. She had vanished a year ago with Johnson's $500,000 and his Bentley, disappearing without a trace. But now, through a viral clip shared by a Port Harcourt barber, Madman turns out to be Lagos billionaire. She recognized that jawline, that calm voice. The man she once betrayed was back in the headlines. Monica's eyes narrowed. "So you went looking for love dressed like a lunatic?" she hissed. "And you found it in Port Harcourt?" She tossed her wineglass against the wall, glass shattering like her temper. "I made you, Johnson. I made you beg me. And now you're proposing to a secretary in rags?" She stared at the headline again. "Young woman saves mad man finds out he's a billionaire." Her lips twisted into a cold smirk. "We'll see how long this love lasts." Meanwhile, Johnson's mansion, Banana Island. The mansion gates slid open with a smooth hum. Sandra's eyes widened as the car drove into the compound. A long marble driveway led to a grand, white mansion with fountains dancing at the entrance. Staff lined up in uniforms, bowing as Johnson stepped out and offered Sandra his hand. She hesitated. "This is your home?" "Ours," he replied. The word ours sent a strange warmth into her chest. No man had ever said that to her before. Inside, the house looked like a palace. Chandeliers sparkled from above. Artworks she had only seen in textbooks hung on the walls. A grand piano stood silently by the window. Sandra walked like she was in a trance. "This can't be real." she whispered. Johnson walked beside her, watching her carefully. You deserve all of this. You saw me when I was invisible. You helped me when I had nothing to offer. She turned to him slowly. But this is a lot to take in. I know, he said, which is why I want you to take your time. This isn't about showing off wealth, it's about showing you what's possible. She smiled gently. It already feels like more than a dream. But before their moment could settle, Johnson's phone buzzed. It was a private number, unknown. He frowned and picked up. Hello? A familiar voice slid through the line like poison. Hi, darling. Did you miss me? His eyes widened. Monica? Sandra turned to him, sensing something was wrong. What do you want? Johnson asked, stepping away. Monica chuckled coldly. You didn't think I'd be gone forever, did you? I see you've found a new toy. Poor little Port Harcourt girl. Sweet. Johnson's jaw clenched. Don't come near her. Relax, baby, she said mockingly. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want what I deserve. My place beside you. And if I don't get it, well, I wonder what your investors would say if they found out you were pretending to be insane in public. Johnson ended the call without replying. His hands were shaking slightly, but his face remained calm. Sandra stood up. Who was that? He stared at her for a moment before answering. Someone from my past. Someone I hoped I'd never have to see again. The next day, company headquarters. Sandra stood nervously by Johnson's side as they entered the glass skyscraper that housed Anditech Group. Employees bowed and greeted him as Sir. Everyone noticed the graceful young woman beside him, but nobody dared to ask questions. In the boardroom, Johnson smiled and turned to the directors. Meet Sandra, he said. She has a degree in economics and real-world wisdom. I'm appointing her as assistant manager for our non-profit tech education program. Gasps. Whispers. Sandra felt the heat in her cheeks but stood tall. She was ready to work. She knew this was bigger than her. That afternoon, as she reviewed her new office, a bouquet of white lilies arrived. There was no card. But when Sandra leaned in, a folded note slipped from inside the petals. Tell him I'm back. Let's see how strong this love is when I rip the truth out in front of everyone. Sandra's hands trembled as she stared at the note. Johnson burst through the mansion doors after Sandra called him, holding the note. She was pale, sitting on the edge of the bed. She found us, didn't she? Sandra asked. Johnson nodded slowly. She's trying to scare you. Sandra looked up. She said something strange. She said she'll rip the truth out in front of everyone. What truth? Johnson hesitated. Then he sat down. She was my first real relationship. I was so in love. I ignored every red flag. I trusted her with my money, my home, even my passwords. Sandra's eyes widened. She ran off with $500,000 and my Bentley. I was crushed. But what hurts more is that she never loved me. She said I was fun to play with. That's when I decided I was done looking for love in the wrong places. Sandra reached for his hand. I'm not Monica. I know, he said gently. But she won't stop. She's not after me anymore, after you. Outside, headlights flashed at the gate. A guard's voice buzzed through the intercom. Sir, there's a woman here, says she's your fiancée. She's refusing to leave. Sandra and Johnson looked at each other, and then, from the speaker, Monica's voice rang loud and clear. Johnson, tell your little housemaid to come outside. Let her hear the truth from me. Sandra's heart dropped. Johnson's fists clenched. It was time to face the past. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the steady pounding of Sandra's heart and the angry voice of Monica echoing from the intercom speaker. Johnson, don't hide. I said, come out and tell her the truth, or I will. Sandra stood frozen, her eyes locked on the speaker. Why is she doing this? She whispered. Johnson turned to her slowly, his jaw tight, because she's not used to losing, and this time she knows she already has. He walked toward the wall panel and pressed the gate intercom. Let her in, he told the guard. Sandra's head turned sharply. What? We end this now. Johnson said. A few moments later, the black gates opened, and Monica strolled in like she owned the place. She was dressed a destroy-tight red gown, heels that clicked like hammers, and a smirk that could curdle milk. Her long dark weave swung behind her as if following her mood. She walked into the living room with a slow, deliberate strut, her eyes fixed on Sandra the entire time. "So," Monica began, folding her arms, "this is her? The little charity project who stole my seat?" Sandra stood up but said nothing. She was trembling, but not with fear, with strength. Monica tilted her head. "You think he really loves you? You think you're special?" "Enough," Johnson said, stepping between them. Monica's eyes flashed. "No, not enough. She deserves to know who you really are, Johnson. Tell her how many women you've tricked with your 'I'm searching for true love' routine." He turned to her with fire in his voice. "Only one. And it worked." Monica laughed bitterly. "Please, you're still the same desperate man who begged me for love. You remember that, don't you? How you cried the day I left?" She turned to Sandra. "He was nothing before me. I introduced him to the real elite. He was just a fancy office boy trying to make it big." Sandra held her ground. "Then why did you leave him?" Monica sneered. "Because I was bored. Because he was soft. He thought flowers and poems could keep me. I needed more. I needed someone who knew how to control people, not someone who hides behind suits and love songs." Johnson stepped forward. "You left because you never knew how to love. You saw kindness as weakness. And now you're angry because you realize I gave that same love to someone else, someone who actually deserves it." Monica's eyes burned. "You think this girl can handle your world? Do you know what people will say? That you married a nobody, an orphan, a secretary who once lived in a one-room apartment." "I don't care what they say," Johnson said. "She gave me hope when I had none, when I had no name, no money. Just a tattered suit and a fake beard, she treated me like a human being. That's more than you ever did." Monica looked at Sandra with sharp eyes. "He didn't tell you about the documents, did he?" Sandra blinked. "What documents?" "Johnson and I signed a private partnership deal 3 years ago," Monica said smugly. "His lawyer didn't even know. I helped him during his expansion, and in return, I demanded 10% ownership of his holding company." Johnson's face darkened. Monica continued, "I still have a copy. If I go public with it, your little perfect love story becomes a scandal. His company gets frozen, and your assistant manager role? Gone." Sandra looked at Johnson. "Is that true?" He sighed. "Yes. She helped me during a difficult expansion year. I was in a desperate place and agreed to her conditions, before I knew her true colors. But the deal was never legalized by my board. It's not binding." Monica grinned. "Doesn't matter. The media won't care. All they need is a whisper of scandal. Investors panic. Stocks fall." Sandra stepped forward, steady and calm. "You're using fear to get back what you lost. That says more about you than it does about me." Monica's face twitched. "I may be an orphan," Sandra continued, "but my parents raised me with values. They taught me not to cheat, not to steal, and never to hurt people just because I feel small. You left him, Monica. You made your choice. Now live with it." Monica's hands clenched. "You think you can talk to me like that?" "I just did," Sandra said. Johnson stood beside her. "And I back every word." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then Monica laughed coldly. "You two are a joke." She turned on her heel, stormed out of the mansion, and slammed the door behind her. Outside, her car tires screeched as she sped off into the night. Johnson let out a long breath and turned to Sandra. "I'm sorry. I never wanted her to come back." Sandra took his hand. "She's gone, and I'm still here." He looked at her with eyes full of gratitude. "You're stronger than I imagined." "I've had to be," she said softly. "Life didn't give me much choice." 1 week later, a new beginning. News of the confrontation never made it to the press. Johnson's legal team handled everything quickly. Monica's fake claim was dismissed, and a quiet settlement ensured she wouldn't try again. But the headlines that did spread were very different. Young woman appointed assistant manager of Anditech's education arm after Billionaire's surprise love story. From street kindness to boardroom power, meet Sandra, the secretary who changed a billionaire's life. Sandra moved into her new office with confidence. Johnson visited often, proud and supportive. She didn't ask for favors. She earned every step she took. But even as their love grew, a new journey waited ahead that neither of them saw coming. It started with a faint flutter and a missed period. Sandra stood in the bathroom, holding the test in shaky hands. Positive. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from joy. She ran to the balcony, where Johnson was sitting with a book. "Johnson." He looked up and smiled. "Yes, love?" She held up the test. "We're having a baby." He blinked once, twice, then dropped the book. "You're serious?" She nodded, crying and laughing at the same time. He stood up and lifted her off the ground, spinning her in the air. "Oh my God, Sandra, you've given me everything." But what they didn't know was that it wouldn't be one baby. It would be two. And their story had only just begun. The delivery room was bright and cold, yet everything felt warm and sacred. The moment the doctor's voice echoed, "It's a girl!" and "It's a boy!" Tears rolled freely down Johnson's cheeks as he stood beside Sandra, holding her hand tightly. She was drenched in sweat, her breath weak but steady, a glowing smile on her exhausted face. Two nurses held the newborns up for her to see, a baby boy wrapped in blue and a baby girl wrapped in soft pink. "Twins," she whispered, overwhelmed. "They're really ours." Johnson bent down and kissed her forehead. "You did it, Sandra. You gave me the one thing I never knew I needed: family." They named the children after Sandra's late parents, the ones who had taught her compassion and strength, despite having very little. The boy was named Philip, and the girl, Grace. Back at the mansion, a quiet celebration followed. No press, no noise, just close friends, loyal staff, and love. But outside the golden gates of their paradise, trouble was stirring once more. 2 months later, the hidden plot. Unbeknownst to them, Monica hadn't truly disappeared. The failed confrontation had only made her more dangerous. She couldn't believe Johnson had moved on, married Sandra, and was now living his perfect little life, with twins no less. She sat in a dark hotel room in Victoria Island, eyes glued to her phone, scrolling through every article, every photo of Sandra's rising profile. Assistant manager, mother of Johnson's children. Public speaker, Monica scoffed. "You think you've won? Just wait." She opened a laptop, pulled out a flash drive, and loaded a file-secret video footage from over a year ago. It showed Johnson, in disguise, walking around Port Harcourt. In the video, a stranger could be heard saying, "Isn't that the crazy man they chased yesterday? Why is he talking so normal today?" With the right editing, Monica could spin the story. It seemed like Johnson was mentally unstable, unfit to run a billion-dollar company. She uploaded it anonymously to a gossip blog. The headline the next morning went viral. Shocking video. Billionaire Johnson Anderson caught wandering Port Harcourt streets, dressed as a madman. Is Johnson hiding mental illness? Shocking claims arise amidst sudden marriage to unknown woman. Johnson's phone didn't stop ringing. At the office, damage control. Johnson paced the glass conference room, his core management team seated around the oval table. The tension was thick. "Sir, the media is asking for a statement," one of his PR officers said. "Investors are concerned. We've lost nearly 4% in morning stock." "Let them be concerned," Johnson said calmly. "We tell the truth." "Sir, if I may," Sandra said, walking in with Grace in a baby carrier and Philip sleeping against her chest in a sling. She hadn't planned to come, but when she saw the headlines, she knew she had to. Everyone turned. Johnson's eyes softened. "You should be resting." "I can't," she said. "Not when people are trying to erase everything we've built." She stepped forward. "Let's not deny it. Let's own it. You dressed as a madman not because you were sick, but because you were searching for something deeper than money. You were looking for a heart." She looked around the room. "That's not weakness. That's bravery. And it's time people heard that side of the story." 3 days later, Sandra and Johnson sat side by side in front of cameras. The interview was aired live across major networks. Sandra held her babies as she spoke calmly, with emotion. "Yes, my husband disguised himself as a madman," she said. "He did it to find love in its rawest form, and I'm proud of him for it." Johnson leaned forward. "The real madness isn't walking the street in a tattered coat. It's being surrounded by people who smile at you only because of your money. I needed someone who could see Menno my bank account." By the time the interview ended, the world had changed its tune. The love test. Why this billionaire faked madness to find his queen. Sandra Anderson becomes national symbol of kindness and strength. The stocks bounced back within 48 hours. Public support skyrocketed. People began sending letters from all over the country, telling their own stories of kindness. Sandra became a national role model. But the biggest surprise came the following week. Sandra was invited to speak at the Youth Women Empowerment Summit in Abuja. She wore a modest blue gown, hair neatly packed in a bun, her soft voice echoing across the large hall filled with girls and young women. "I was just a secretary with a meager salary," she said, "but I carried my values like armor. I didn't give to impress. I gave because that's who I was raised to be." She held up a framed photo of her late parents. "My mother and father never had riches, but they taught me that the way you treat people, especially people who have nothing's what defines you. That single act of kindness to a stranger changed my life forever." The crowd stood up and clapped for over a minute. Among them were girls who had once lost hope, but Sandra's story rekindled something deep inside them. That evening, back in Lagos, Sandra sat on the garden bench with Grace asleep in her arms and Philip resting beside her. Johnson walked over and sat down, wrapping his arms around them. "You were amazing," he said. She leaned on his shoulder. "We made it, didn't we?" "We did," he smiled. "Through lies, scandals, betrayal, we still made it." Sandra looked down at the sleeping twins. "Sometimes I wonder, what if I had walked past you that day?" Johnson smiled. "Then I would still be a madman, lost in the crowd." They both laughed softly. The garden lights glowed around them. Somewhere nearby, crickets chirped. The fountain bubbled gently, and in that moment, beneath the Lagos stars, they realized something important. True love wasn't something you found. It was something that found you when your heart was open and your hands were kind. And for Johnson and Sandra Anderson, that one act of kindness had become the foundation of a future no money could buy. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.